Hello there, friends. How are you today? I hope your weeks are off to a great start. Wanted to talk to you about a topic that is, pretty near and dear to me. And I think you can relate to this. So, do you ever get frustrated when you perceive that there are these office mandates to use AI or to become AI first, but you have no clue what that really means for your day-to-day work? Or if you're the one encouraging your teams to use AI, do you wonder why teams aren't enthusiastic about it, maybe even actively resisting AI? Then you're in the right place. I'm Jill Hines. I'm your friendly AI strategist and founder of Groundspring, and I have some answers for you that we're going to explore together this week on this live stream series. So, welcome to Get Real with AI Governance Week, where every day at noon Eastern Time, I am going to step you through each piece of the REAL method, one letter at a time. Now, the REAL method is something that I use in my practice that I'm really happy to share with you. On Friday, we're going to cap things off with a special surprise, some spicy takes, so don't miss a day. First, I need to explain a little bit about my take on AI governance, and in case anyone is worried that I'm just going to talk about compliance and policy, that's not what we're going to do. The way that I see it, AI governance, or the way you go about defining and realizing the changes around AI adoption that you want to see in an organization, that's all about managing organizational and technical change. So yes, that does include enforcing some rules of the road about what you can and can't do, and like defining those rules. But it's also about getting a shared vision about the potential you see with AI and how you want to get there in a way that aligns with your organizational, cultural goals and values. So it's not just about enforcing a mandate, it's just getting aligned with who you really are and where you want to go. When AI governance fails to land, and when people, and you've seen this, people bring their own AI accounts to work, leadership will throw out these overly broad mandates about adopting AI, or it will throw out a policy document that people just tend to ignore. That means that there is a gap. And that's the gap between the future vision that you want and the current state. You cannot just ignore the current state and wish it away. I mean, that would be easy, right? You can, try and hope that people will just get over it and get on board with AI adoption. But really what you need to do is some work here. You need to figure out the root causes of why it is that people might be reluctant or have concerns. And then you need to design your AI governance strategy from that point. So I've spent more than 10 years in digital product strategy and management and more than 20 doing human-centered research. So I naturally see this gap as a design problem to be solved. And guess what, friends? We already have lots of approaches to solving design problems. We just need to dust them off and use them, maybe give them a tweak here and there for this AI-specific time that we're in, but they still apply. I bridge this gap with something that I call the REAL method, which is what we're talking about all this week. It stands for rooted, embedded, actionable, and legible. So we're going to step through, as I said, all of these one day at a time. And we're going to start with what it means to be rooted. Okay. So I'm going to set this scene with some statistics for you. And spoiler, there are many statistics out there supporting the same narrative. So bear that in mind. These statistics come from just one recent Harvard Business Review article, which I will make available in the comments. But there are, as I said, lots of studies are painting the same picture. And basically, that is that executives and employees are living on two totally different planets when it comes to how they think about AI. So here are just some of the stats. In the article, they cite a Mercer study. Mercer is an HR consulting firm. And they found that 43% of workers believe that AI and other advanced technology will make their job more frustrating or difficult. And 53% agree that it will impact their job security. So you can imagine what kind of effect that has on people who might be adopting AI, right? They're going to think twice. Nearly half of executives, according to the Harvard Business Review's own study, reported significant positive ROI from their initial AI investments. 45%, not too bad. Among the middle managers, though, that number drops to 27%. Okay. Over the past year, nearly 2/3 of executives, so like 66%, say they've become much more positive about generative AI. Among middle managers, though, that's 49% who say the same thing. Middle managers are 64% more likely than their senior colleagues to describe themselves as cautious. Okay. So I could go on, and the HBR article is by far not the only study confirming this. But it goes to show we are not all on the same page. We don't even see reality in the same way. And I see this sometimes with clients too in different ways. And it might look like, an executive mandate that says something like, we want to be 30% more efficient by the end of the year. Kind of blanket statement, let's all get moving, figure it out, and go forward. Okay. That mandate might be well and good for some areas of the business. Maybe not, but you could imagine that maybe that there are some, engineers or some people who have a lot of like automated type work that, you could see a path to 30%. But what about the folks who are in, say, customer service, who have and are evaluated by how well they perform for their key clients in a very white glove, hands-on kind of way, right? What does 30% more efficient for customer service to your key clients actually look like? Maybe AI has a role in that, maybe it doesn't. But the point is that blanket mandate that you're throwing out to everyone, it's going to land differently depending on what your employees are incented to do, right? So this kind of disconnect, that's the definition of being unrooted. Having this ambitious vision, but it's totally disconnected from the ground truth. When you're not in contact with the ground, just think about this. How can you possibly move forward, right? It's hard. So the answer to getting rooted is to understand operating reality in your organization, okay? And there's lots of places you can focus on this. And I do think there is a case for thinking about your focus in terms of AI. There are some generic ways that we can get more information about the ground truth, but when we are specifically talking about AI systems, you're going to want to adjust your questions and like what you pay attention to a little bit more differently. So we're going to walk through how to do this in brief, okay? So I've been doing user research for a long time. I think, as I said, about 20 years doing all kinds of research. And so where I start is by talking to actual human beings doing actual work on the front lines, okay? And so the first step in that process is to figure out who to talk to. Some of the things I think are particularly important in an AI context is to get the cross-functional perspective. As we know, you can look at any kind of AI risk management standard, and that cross-functionality element of risk management is really important because we all see risks through one particular lens. We all see opportunities through one particular lens, and it's not until we kind of marry those up that we get a fuller picture, right? So you want to think about key stakeholders up and down the hierarchy, if you think hierarchically, or maybe across units, teams, et cetera. So you can think about titles in that context, but I'd also encourage you to think about who's particularly invested in moving AI forward, who is really sort of going out there being an advocate for the technology, championing it, kind of modeling what they're doing with other teams. That's someone who I think might have a special insight on how to kind of bridge the technology with a need in the organization. So you might want to talk to them. But you don't just want to talk to those people, because the idea is not to just hear what you want to hear, but it is to kind of understand broadly what's going on in an organization. So on the flip side, you might want to think about the detractors too. People typically want to be on board with what their organizations are doing. So if you have people who are very reluctant, just ask some curious questions about why that is. They probably have a good reason. And maybe it's not good enough to change your planning, but it is good enough to, and worthy, frankly, of consideration. Now, you don't just want to think about the folks inside your organization either. One of the, I think, characteristics of generative AI technology is that it has far-reaching impacts, both within an org and eventually outside of an organization. So you want to think about, are there maybe members of the board who have a stake in understanding how this changes your risk profile? Maybe end users, if you're doing something customer facing or that impacts a customer facing function. Who are the folks who are most vulnerable if something goes wrong in these use cases? And those are people you want to talk to as well. What you're seeking here is to get this diversity of perspectives. And it's a little counterintuitive, but I promise you, this is where the richness comes out. You finding those friction points and thinking of them as our friends, the friction points, that's really where you can expose what is broken. And that's the first step to kind of bridging the gap, right? Now, once you know who to talk to, you're going to think about, well, what should I ask them? And when it comes to making AI governance in particular work, I like to probe on a few things in particular, not an exhaustive list. Of course, it's going to, vary depending on your organization, but these are some of my back pocket questions that are top of mind in an AI context. So one of the fundamental things I asked, and also good warm-up question, how are you currently thinking about and using AI? And importantly, can you show me what you're doing with AI? Like actually sit with me and walk me through how it is that you're navigating maybe various interfaces. Are you copying and pasting things from one place to another? Is it integrated as part of like a workflow? Where are you having, input into the process? Those details can get lost when someone is just reporting them verbally to you. So being able to sit with someone physically or even virtually is really important, because the nuances and those details are where the opportunities really live to help those folks. So have them show you things. Relatedly, as you might guess from that question, I am very interested in understanding what people's workflows look like. Okay, so I want to understand from beginning to end, what are you going through to accomplish a particular task where AI may be a fit in this equation. Again, maybe it's not, but I want to understand the full context. That if we are going to apply AI to solve problems for our business, that's where we need to be focusing. So you might be very familiar with this statistic, something like it was an MIT, I believe, research piece that said something like 85% of AI pilots fail. Well, kind of digging beneath the headline, one of the things that you learned is that the reason that those things have failed in part is because people were focusing on the wrong use cases. They wanted to kind of, the ones that didn't do so well were the ones that were very kind of, I'm going to say splashy, very like end user facing, but where people were actually seeing ROI was in the nitty gritty back end details. And similarly, that's why, you want to interrogate what's going on in those nitty gritty workflows, because you may very well find opportunity there. You might find those friction points. So then, I also ask, we kind of reflect on that workflow. What's AI helping you with, and where is it making things worse? It's not always, a panacea out there. I think we all know that, but let's be real about that and talk about it and understand why. I also ask people about what concerns they have about AI, and if there was ever a time that they could tell me about, like a specific instance where they doubted whether or not they should use AI. And the reason I do this is that because one of the kind of hidden friction points, particularly in organizations where it is difficult to be psychologically safe or simply have the communication channels to share concerns about particular AI uses, is that concerns around maybe data privacy or security or ethics. They present a little bit of a drag for people who are on the front lines. They're weighing these considerations, whether you talk about them or not, and understanding what kinds of questions they ask can help you in leadership understand how to build your AI governance to address those specifically and directly. That's going to smooth things along. You're not always going to have the answers to some of the big ethical questions. These are not always easy, but I think, again, acknowledging them, agreeing that this is part of our shared reality is super beneficial, and people feel heard. And that's a great gesture of empathy and a means of like kind of keeping people kind of moving forward and not getting stuck, if that makes sense. There's a somewhat related question too that I like to ask, and this one is around values. We encode values into our AI systems all the time, in sometimes very subtle ways and in sometimes very prominent ways. So it's really important to talk about them for the same reasons I was just kind of describing about the, finding out about concerns. You could think about, I use AI for my business, and I have system instructions about my business values, about my brand voice, about things that are important to me. So that is a very direct way that I am expressing a value and putting it into a system and biasing that system toward my way of thinking. And we do that all the time through lots of different decisions that we make in AI governance as well. So that's an important line of questioning, and I wouldn't dismiss that. And if you really sincerely care about particular business values, your mission and vision, you need to make sure that people are kind of like recognizing that or seeing where it's not carrying through into these AI use cases. And then one question that I found useful to ask, and you could do this in a number of ways, but I asked folks to put a number on a rating scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 7, something like that. And the question that I put to them for rating is, would customers find our use of AI trustworthy? Would you strongly agree, strongly disagree, something of that nature? And the actual number is not important here, but the thinking around the number is very important. If they would rate it, oh, that's a 1. I don't think we would be perceived at all trustworthy. Well, of course, we want to talk about that. But similarly, if you get to a midpoint, that might also be like, okay, well, it's working in some places, but maybe not others. And putting a number to it gets people to think about it in a different way. So that's just another little maybe researcher trick you can put in your back pocket and give a try. So, all right. So those are who we're going to ask, what we're going to ask. And ideally, after you go through all of these, questions and talking to folks and all this grounding work, you're going to have a lot of information. So what are you going to do with this information? Well, you're going to use it to build responsive governance is what you're going to do. So what this means is after talking with people, observing how they work, you now have a good start at a lot of things that are very foundational to AI governance. You're going to have the start of an AI inventory. So you're going to know what tools people are using and for what purposes. And you're going to ideally start tracking that, right? You're also going to get a good sense of risk tolerance. So of course there are, models like the EU AI Act that you could look to that are very specific about the prohibited uses and, certain other characteristics of items in a risk tier. And that's a good starting place. But also for your organization, you might just have a different perspective on risk. And that's okay, as long as it doesn't maybe violate some of the prohibited things, of course, right? But I'm going to assume we're all good people doing good things. And I think what you can get a sense of after talking to folks is just kind of where the boundaries lie a little bit. And then this is useful as we talk about later in the week when we make things actionable. Every risk tier is going to have a particular action required of people when we perceive we're doing work in that particular tier. So I don't want to go too far down the risk rabbit hole, but I just want to say above and beyond legal requirements and so forth, there are nuances to how individual organizations think about risk, and we should build that in to our thinking and our governance. All right. So now that's the risk tiers piece. What else do you get out of all of this rich data? Where people are getting caught up. And I find that when you can show those use cases to leadership with specific examples to say, I talked to this team, this is how they're using the tool, this is what is creating a little bit of a disconnect. What can we do to help clarify maybe the rules of the road? Maybe it's training support that folks need to smooth those things out. Maybe AI doesn't really fit here because of how they're, evaluated in their work. There's lots of possible answers, but they need the questions framed up in very clear and tangible ways. So this rich source of data is a good way to frame that up for them. All right, so I hope that I have, convinced you that instead of basing AI governance on hopes and dreams and unrealistic ROI, which by the way is still being worked out, I don't think anyone's cracked the nut. So you can build a solid ground of understanding on a shared reality that is going to give the chances of your AI success a much greater opportunity to flourish. It's so much more powerful and effective to build on something solid and rooted and that makes sense for where you are in time, even if you want to end up in a different place down the road. You have to kind of start where you are. And that's what this exercise really helps you do. So that's all I have for today. That's being rooted. If you want to keep getting real, you can join me tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern once again, and we're going to talk about the next letter, embedded. Embedded is a huge one. I think it needs to be multiple letters, so I'll have to figure that out. It's definitely the most multifaceted because we can take this good rooting work that we did and embed it in all kinds of people systems, policies, technical systems. So there's lots of permutations of how rooted AI governance manifests further downstream. So I'm going to touch on some of that and seed some ideas with you tomorrow, but just know it's a really rich area to continue kind of pushing at. If you want to get real in real life, just a quick note that I'm going to be in Charlotte, North Carolina on Monday, June 29th. I'm going to do a hands-on workshop where we go through this real method and we marry that up with a case study and we talk about it and we figure out how it could work for individual organizations. And we just kind of get together and share what it is that we are struggling with and what would help us to navigate these sometimes really sticky questions about real AI governance, but we do it together. So it's a lot of fun. I'm going to add a registration link in the comments for those in the area. And if you want to learn more about how I help organizations, you can visit my website, groundspring.ai. My contact information is there. And if you go to my contact form and you opt in to communications, I will send you an AI strategy blueprint, which is a nice little takeaway you can print out. You can work through a prospective test case for AI that will help you think it through in a very grounded way. So I hope that will be helpful to you. Until next time, everybody, I hope that you keep it real, and I will see you tomorrow.